Welcome back to Power Profiles. Yeah, today we are diving deep into the life of Donald Trump.
Oh, a fascinating choice.
He's a figure who really embodies the American dream in many
Oh, you're
ways, but
absolutely.
also someone who, well, sparks a lot of debate.
Yeah, he's someone who you either love him or you hate him, and it's really something.
And there's not a lot of in between, is there?
No, there's very little in between.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
We're
Yeah.
talking about a guy who went from, you know, building these luxury skyscrapers to starring in a reality TV show to becoming the president of the United
You
States.
know, it's an incredible journey
It really is.
when you think about it.
It is quite a journey.
Yeah, and it all started with his roots in real estate.
So true. Everyone knows about Trump Tower and his other high-profile projects, but
Yeah.
he didn't start at the top, did he?
Not exactly. He was born into a wealthy family, sure. His father, Fred Trump, was a successful real estate developer in New York City.
Right.
But Donald's early ventures were more focused on middle-class housing in the outer boroughs.
So how did he make the leap to those glitzy Manhattan developments?
So it was a gradual transition. In the 1970s, he shifted his focus to Manhattan and really embraced this idea of creating grand, attention-grabbing projects. He understood the power of branding and spectacle, and he used that to his advantage.
And that's where the Grand Hyatt Hotel comes in, right?
Exactly. The Grand Hyatt, completed in 1978, was a huge turning point for him. It was a massive renovation project that really put him on the map in Manhattan. And it really laid the groundwork for what would become his most iconic project, Trump Tower.
Trump Tower really became synonymous with his name and his brand. It was like the symbol of success and extravagance.
It was a very deliberate move on his part.
Yeah.
He wanted to create a building that would be a statement, something that would project his name and image onto the city skyline.
Yeah, and from there he just kept expanding his empire.
He did.
He built casinos in Atlantic City. He licensed his name to all sorts of products. He even bought the Miss Universe pageant.
Right.
It's like he wanted to conquer every industry he could.
He definitely had a knack for spotting opportunities and capitalizing on them, but his journey wasn't always smooth sailing. He also faced his fair share of challenges, particularly when it came to his finances.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The bankruptcies that had to have been a major blow.
It was a defining period in his career.
Hmm.
In the early 1990s, he was heavily invested in the casino industry, and when the economy took a downturn, he found himself in deep financial trouble.
I remember reading that several of his companies, including some of those big-name casinos, actually filed for bankruptcy. That had to have been a huge hit to his reputation.
It definitely tarnished his image as this infallible business tycoon. But it's important to remember that bankruptcy is a legal process, and it doesn't necessarily mean complete financial ruin.
Yep.
In Trump's case, allowed him to restructure his debts and eventually bounce back.
So how did he manage to recover from that? Because he clearly didn't just disappear after those setbacks.
He was incredibly resilient, and he had this remarkable ability to reinvent himself and find new avenues for success. One of those avenues was media. He diversified his brand and started licensing his name to various products and ventures. But his biggest move was into the world of reality television.
Ah, yes. The Apprentice. I remember that show being huge. It was like everyone was watching it.
It was a cultural phenomenon,
You what?
and it played a crucial role in rehabilitating his image. On the show, he was portrayed as this decisive, successful businessman, someone who could cut through the noise and make tough decisions. It was almost like a carefully crafted persona that appealed to a wide audience.
It's perfect timing, too.
Hmm.
Right when his reputation was taking a hit from the bankruptcies, he pops up on this show that basically makes him a household name again. But this time as a successful, no-nonsense leader.
It was a brilliant strategic move. It allowed him to tap into a new audience and present himself as a different kind of leader, one who wasn't afraid to speak his mind and make bold decisions.
So looking back, do you think The Apprentice was a stepping stone to his political ambitions? Or was that always part of the plan?
That's a question that has been debated by many. He had expressed interest in politics before even flirting with the idea of running for president in previous years. But The Apprentice undoubtedly gave him a platform to connect with a broader audience and cultivate a certain image that would later prove beneficial in his political career.
It's interesting to think about how a reality TV show could have played a role in shaping the political landscape.
It highlights the power of media and how it can be used to shape public perception and influence political outcomes. In Trump's case, The Apprentice helped him to cultivate a persona that resonated with a certain segment of the population and that ultimately paved the way for his unlikely rise to the White House. And it's that connection with a specific segment of the population that really fueled his 2016 presidential campaign.
Right. He really tapped into this sense of frustration and disillusionment that a lot of people were feeling. They felt like the system wasn't working for them, and they were looking for someone who would shake things up.
Absolutely. And he presented himself as the ultimate outsider, someone who wasn't beholden to special interests or the political establishment.
Right.
And his message resonated particularly with those who felt left behind by globalization and economic change.
And he wasn't afraid to say what was on his mind,
Oh, no.
even if it was controversial. Some people loved that about him.
Right.
Others not so much.
Yeah, his campaign was definitely unconventional, to say the least. He used social media to bypass traditional media outlets and connect directly with voters. And he wasn't shy about attacking his opponents, often using personal insults and inflammatory rhetoric.
And it worked. He defied the polls and the pundits and won the election. It was a huge
It was
upset.
a huge upset. I think everyone was shocked.
I was shocked.
His victory shocked a lot of people. It really highlighted the deep divisions that existed in American society. And it signaled a shift in the political landscape with the rise of populism and nationalism.
So let's talk about his presidency. What were some of the key policies he focused on?
Well, domestically, he prioritized tax cuts, deregulation, and appointing conservative judges. One of his signature achievements was the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017.
That was a big one. It significantly lowered corporate tax rates and made changes to individual income tax brackets.
Yeah, it was a major victory for Republicans and businesses. But critics argued that it primarily benefited the wealthy and would increase the national debt. It's a complex piece of legislation that continues to be debated today.
And then there was his focus on deregulation. He argued that excessive regulations were stifling businesses and hindering economic growth.
Yeah, he rolled back a number of environmental regulations, loosened financial regulations, and overturned rules related to healthcare and labor. These moves were cheered by some, but they also sparked a lot of backlash, particularly from environmental groups and consumer advocates.
On the international stage, he really shook things up as well. He engaged in trade wars, renegotiated trade deals, and took a more isolationist approach to foreign policy.
His America First agenda really drove his foreign policy decisions. He imposed tariffs on goods from China, renegotiated NAFTA, and withdrew the U.S. from the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement.
And who can forget his meetings with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea? That was definitely a bold move.
It was unprecedented. No other sitting U.S. president had ever met with a North Korean leader. While the meetings generated a lot of headlines and initial optimism, they ultimately failed to produce any lasting agreements on denuclearization.
And of course, his presidency was also marked by a number of controversies and scandals.
Yes, there were numerous investigations, legal challenges, and ethical concerns that plagued his administration. He faced accusations of obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and campaign finance violations.
And then there were the 2 impeachments. It's got to be some kind of record, right?
It's certainly unique. The first impeachment in 2019 stemmed from his attempts to pressure Ukraine to investigate his political rival Joe Biden. The second in 2021 was for inciting the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
Those were incredibly turbulent times. The country was deeply divided, and the political climate was incredibly tense.
The impeachments were highly partisan affairs, with Democrats largely supporting them and Republicans largely opposing them. Ultimately, Trump was acquitted by the Senate in both cases.
But they definitely left a mark on his presidency and further fueled the polarization that was already gripping the nation.
Absolutely. And then there were his claims about the 2020 election. He refused to concede defeat to Joe Biden and repeatedly made allegations of widespread voter fraud despite a lack of evidence.
That led to a lot of legal challenges, right?
He and his allies filed numerous lawsuits challenging the election results in several states, but those lawsuits were largely unsuccessful and no evidence of widespread fraud was ever found.
So despite his claims, there was no real legal basis for overturning the election results.
That was the conclusion of multiple courts, including those with judges appointed by Trump himself, but his refusal to accept the outcome of the election further eroded trust in democratic institutions and intensified the divisions within the country.
And those divisions didn't disappear when he left office.
Right, they didn't. He remained a powerful force in the Republican Party and continued to exert influence over his loyal base of supporters. His claims about the election being stolen became a rallying cry for many on the right, and it sowed seeds of doubt about the legitimacy of the electoral process.
And he didn't just fade into the background after leaving office. He continued to hold rallies, make pronouncements on social media, and even hinted at a potential run for president in 2024.
His post-presidency was almost as eventful as his time in office. He faced ongoing legal challenges related to his business dealings, as well as investigations into his role in the January 6th insurrection.
It seems like there was always something new happening with him, always some new controversy or headline-grabbing event.
He had a knack for staying in the spotlight even after leaving the most powerful office in the world. Whether you loved him or hated him, there was no denying that he remained a significant figure in American politics and culture.
Yeah, it really is amazing to think about the sheer scope of his impact. From real estate to reality TV to the highest office in the land. And you're right, love him or hate him, he was impossible to ignore.
He really tapped into something in the American psyche. He understood the power of celebrity, the allure of wealth, and the frustrations of those who felt left behind. He channeled those feelings into a political movement that reshaped the Republican Party and continues to have a profound impact on American politics.
It's interesting because on one hand, he was this larger-than-life figure who seemed to defy all the rules. But on the other hand, he was also a very polarizing figure who sparked intense debate and division.
That's the paradox of Donald Trump. He was both a unifier and a divider. He appealed to those who yearned for a strong leader who would shake up the system, but he also alienated many with his rhetoric and his policies.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do you think his lasting legacy will be? How will history remember Donald Trump?
That's a tough question, and I think it will be debated for years to come. He was a president of many firsts and a president of many controversies. He challenged norms, broke traditions, and left an indelible mark on American politics and culture.
Yeah, it's clear that his impact will continue to be felt for generations to come. He has fundamentally changed the way we think about politics, media, and even celebrity.
His story is a reminder that American democracy is a complex and ever-evolving system. It's a system that can be both resilient and fragile, capable of great progress, and also susceptible to manipulation and division.
We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, from his early days as a brash real estate developer to his tumultuous presidency and his ongoing influence on the political landscape. Donald Trump's story is one that will continue to fascinate and challenge us.
It's a story that reminds us that the American dream is not always a straight path. It's a story of ambition, risk resilience, and the constant pursuit of success, even in the face of adversity.
And it's a story that's far from over.
Indeed, only time will tell what the final chapter will hold.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Donald Trump. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more power profiles,